Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. 30 years ago, as Secretary of the Brent Trades Council and the Brent Federation of Tenants and Residents Associations, I brought together the group, together with progressive lawyers, that form the second community law centre in Britain, still going strong to this day. The centre has been for 3 decades a lifeline for those in need of legal advice and representation, challenging public authorities, as we did when we won the battle to change housing regulations following the tragic death of a young husband in a high-rise block on the Stonebridge estate, trapped because there was no way out of his burning flat. 3 decades on, as the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Erdington, I was alongside 4 brave families who, funded by legal aid, won a landmark case against Birmingham City Council, which had cut care to 4,100 elderly and disabled residents in Birmingham. Without legal aid, justice for the vulnerable would have been denied and a heartless council would have ploughed on regardless. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the honourable member for Maidstone and Weald, I believe, spoke on behalf of many on both sides of this House when she summed up the nature of the dilemma. Hundreds certainly come, like to her surgery, to my surgery every month. Many face urgent and serious problems relating to everyday issues, such as debt, employment, benefits, care services and family matters. I often refer these people to specialists like those in the Birmingham Law Centre, Citizens Advice or other legal aid solicitors. Without this help, the people I see would not be able to stay in their homes, in work and in education. The vital advice provided by the specialists in social welfare law has helped many families and individuals that I see to avoid costly litigation and prevent or mitigate the effects of marital and family breakdown. But now, under these proposals, 650,000 people at recent estimates and 500,000, according to the Ministry of Justice's own impact assessment, will lose out on this vital help through changes to legal aid alone at a time when other funding streams for free advice have already been cut or are under threat. In Birmingham, about 6,500 cases will no longer be funded as a consequence. Each of those cases represent a loss of specialist help at a time when it is most needed. Legal aid funding is being withdrawn from all employment advice or welfare benefits advice, virtually all debt advice, nearly half of housing advice and nearly all education advice. There can only be one outcome: avoidable poverty and distress for many thousands of people. Not only will people be less likely to receive advice, but advice will be harder to find as agencies currently funded through legal aid find it more difficult to carry on. For example, the average impact on individual not-for-profit providers of the cuts being proposed will be a 92% drop in legal aid. And this makes no sense, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we know that the right advice early on can save the public purse up to £10 for every pound invested. It is absolutely wrong, therefore, absolutely wrong, that in a civilised society we deny access to people who are affected when things go wrong to the specialist help that they need to put things right. We need to tackle, therefore, as the Honourable Member for Hastings has said, the root of the problem: poor decision-making by the various state bodies involved, as well as continuing to invest in the existing value-for-money frontline advice services like the Citizens Advice Bureau, the 5 tremendous offices in Birmingham and the 13 advice centres. If I can just say this in conclusion, the government has said that it's brought forward these proposals on legal aid following consultation. I think it's clear that these are friendless proposals. It's clear that it's been a dialogue with the deaf because the government simply has not listened. It hasn't listened to people like Gillian Gray from Citizens Advice. In her words, civil legal aid keeps people in their houses, in jobs and out of debt. Hundreds of thousands will now have nowhere to turn. The serious cases of family breakdown, unfair dismissal and refusal of benefits will simply get nowhere. And I too, like the Honourable Member for Lewisham, who spoke earlier in this debate, was present to hear the Supreme Court Justice, Baroness Hale, earlier on this week, as she forensically dissected the government's proposals, arguing that access to the courts without representation is a denial of justice. In her words, there is a well-known ironic saying, usually attributed to Lord Justice Matthew, that in England justice is open to all, like the writs. Justice, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the well-off only is no justice at all. Yeah.